Welcome back to the show, everybody. Snowy day outside today. Now you see why we took a break from the routine last time when we had good weather to go to the tractor salvage yard. So make hay while the sun shines, as the saying goes. So today we will pick back up with the reassembly of the chassis for X231. We've got all the radiator and grill screen parts on the bench here. Hardware, gaskets, plates, tanks, ready to go. We might as well start with the core here. Okay, gasket first, and this is how I prefer to do it. This is 1/8 inch thick cork rubber, all right? And I make the gasket all one piece, no seams, no joints. And you can see on the back side, I've coated it with a light coating of sealer. Same thing for the housing as well. Now, the radiator shop that built the new core for us has a, you could say, a better gasket material for radiator cores. It's a type of, I could say, laminated paper that you put down. It's rather thin, but when it comes in contact with water or coolant, it will actually swell and fill any voids where leak paths may want to develop. But because I had so many, we'll say, anomalies on this gasket surface in the form of all of those threaded inserts and the rest of that stuff, I decided to go with what I was already familiar with, comfortable with. That is a good rubberized cork gasket, single piece sealer to fill any voids. And besides, X231's probably never going to work up a good head of steam anyhow, so this will be just fine. All right, did the same thing to the top surface of the gasket as well as the base surface of the new core. Our new flat steel straps for flange reinforcement. Between a core flange and a gasket, there you are. You have to hunt around to get the threads to engage. That one dropped right in. And I usually start from the center with these and work outward. We'll do a few more here and then we'll go to the back, keep everything even. And just so you know what I'm using, this is it, just a driver handle. And that's about all the torque you're gonna need on these bolts. With these cork gaskets, I gotta go around back here and even things up here really quick, but with these cork gaskets, you don't need a ton of torque. And if you put a lot of torque on these flat metal reinforcement straps, all it's gonna do is just divot them down around each of the bolts. So what you do is just cinch down until you can see that cork gasket compress and actually like move out just a little bit. That's how you know you're tight enough. It'll be an excellent seal. You've got plenty of clamp load all around, and if you over tighten cork gaskets, you'll just start to compress them to the point that they'll split in the center and start heaving out in both directions anyhow. So over tightening really doesn't do you any favors at all. So I'll just keep working around this core. We've just about got everything done at the back. Then we'll finish up on the sides, and then we can move on to the top tank. All the same steps for the top. Everything here came together very well, fits just like it's supposed to. So looking good. Next up, grill panels. this is where we find out if everything is still going to fit now that we've installed the core with permanent gaskets and have everything fully tightened in. We had all these holes lining up during our dry assembly test runs, but everything always changes just a little bit. Next up is what the ZB parts manual calls the molding strip. It has a couple of channels that the grill halves go into. It's a friction fit, pretty simple piece. Just kind of closes the gap between the two halves. Second panel. Now for this top one, even though we're going to have to cinch it a little bit to get the bolt line in, I don't mind that because pressure like that or tension is what's going to keep all this from rattling. So that's actually a good thing. Important to note here, when you have this many interlocking pieces, you don't want to tighten anything until you've at least started everything. So we're still loose everywhere at this point. But before we go any further back here, we need to get the headlight brackets put on each side panel while we can still access nuts and bolts and everything from the inside. So you all remember X231's original headlight brackets. They had been broken and bent and welded more times than I can count. I don't even know how you do that. They did it both sides. You can also tell the same fella that welded these was the guy that welded X231's old shifter back together too. Craftsmanship if I ever saw it. So I've got a better set, a very good set of the same brackets. These were used on everything prior to the Model 445. Yeah, that's how those started out, just like that. But I had to go into the ZB parts manual to figure out hardware for these because these were not used on a 445. So number 12 in the diagram, we looked that up in the list. 12 bracket headlamp. It takes a bolt hex head 3/8 by 16 by 1 inch long, and we just happen to have new old stock period correct Rockfords that matched that description. All right. One thing I want to show you with the mounting holes. So these two are for the bracket here. We have the third one, which is for the wire that will go, the harness that comes through and then goes into the back of the headlight. But if this had been a prior model ZB tractor, they put this pass-through hole for the wire in front of the mounting holes for the headlight bracket. It's just one of those things that my brain notices and then just can't help but want to talk about. In this scenario here, it makes a lot more sense to have the harness behind the bracket, simply because the radiator core is basically blocking you out from in front of it. So maybe the ZB core was positioned a little differently, I don't know. All right, fan shroud, but we also have this square bar. It's just a spacer. Goes up at the top because they made the radiator core header plate a lot deeper at the bottom than they did at the top. But once again, this is that production ZB radiator top, which had a much different radiator than 445. So they were already starting to come around to that redesign, even when they built this tractor. But it just slides between the side panels and the top tank. A little bit tighter over here, so you have to pull it a little bit. There we are. The nice part is it holds itself in place over there. And I can throw fan shroud in on top. So we've got these two cutouts have to go up here just like that. And the bolts will go through the fan shroud, through the side plate, through the spacer, and thread into the radiator top. So we're holding on this side. Start one over here. All right, nothing can fall apart now. And then on each bottom corner of the fan shroud, we have 2 bolts with a nut and a washer. You have to go in. These holes also are plenty oversized. I'm over here trying to stay out of the way of the camera. So there we are. There it is. I found it. Yeah, plenty oversized, so it's pretty easy to line everything in. And now we tighten everything up. Okay, that gives it quite a bit more personality. Good to have that back up front and center again. And we're starting to see about where the hood line is going to shake out once we continue on. So yeah, about like that. So as long as we're in the radiator mode, we might as well look at this threaded hole right here. That is for an angle fitting that attaches at that point. There's a passage that goes up in here to the bypass area around the radiator cap. So this is for your overflow system. We had an angle fitting right here that had a compression furl on the end, and then that attached to a line that went down through this second cutout in the fan shroud. You can see how the other main cutout provides clearance for that radiator hose. So your overflow line will go down through there and basically just kind of right down the rear of the core, and then would be retained by that header plate bolt right there. And if any of you are wondering why I've already fitted the fan shroud, even though we don't have a water pump and a fan yet, well, I can show you here in a minute. Because this is a prototype, everything's just a little bit off. They probably should have brought their fan shroud back at least another inch or so, but everything's going to clear just fine. The fan actually doesn't even go inside of it. Here, I'll show you. I pulled X231's water pump out of storage. So it attaches to the front of the engine block down here. This tube just goes into the hole at the front of the cylinder head, and that's pretty much where it lives. So yeah, that fan doesn't really come into that shroud at all. So if we do all of our overflow tube work and just stay inside of the shroud, everything's going to clear everything else just fine. And the overflow line was one of the few pieces that we lost track of since 2006. No worries, I've got some new 1/4-inch copper line here. I've already straightened out a pretty good run of it. Here is what's left of the old angle fitting that used to be in the top of the radiator right there, and it was cracked, so we weren't able to save it, but it's all right. We got everything else removed. You can see just the compression furl end of it right there. So we've got a brand new one to replace it with. And here is our other little bracket that you can just barely see in one of the photos of X231 from before we disassembled it. So this bracket holds... We won't even bother to edit that out. All right, without dropping it this time. This bracket holds the line in this hole right here, and this other hole goes beneath that bolt right there. So the bracket positions just about like that and holds the end of that line just right inside of that square notch that's in the front of the fan shroud. And this is just mock-up, so we won't put any thread sealant on the pipe threads. We'll just run that in until it kind of holds itself in position. So 3 bends, and I believe trimmed to length. So let's test fit it. Throw the end in that square cutout right there. Routes up through the upper cutout in the shroud, and all right, started into our fitting. So when we square out, it's going to be positioned just like that. Good standoff, everything. Looking good down on that end. Of course, when I let it go, it's, yeah, it'll flop back there, but okay, let's put it in for real. Holding bracket for the bottom. Compression furl and fitting up top. So, bracket at the bottom, there we are. Line into our fitting at the top. All right. Do the final tightening on this as well. Yeah, I think we can line in right there. Yep. Okay, good standoff. Seat the line. Okay. Tighten in the bottom. And we have an overflow tube. And now that we've got this much of it put together, I've been waiting for this point. You'll have a very good visual now of the construction of the whole front end radiator bolster to engine of X231. I want to go back to this comment left by Hal Snyder. And he says, I've never seen a complete 445 engine. How do they differ from Christine? I can use the X253 prototype crawler to answer that, because all of this stuff here is production 445, okay? And yeah, you look at that old flat-fronted slat grill X231, pretty much a flat top hood. The design department really did a good job of adding curves and lines. I do like that cross front grill with the big medallion. And okay, we're getting off track. So we can pop the hood. Okay, prop rod in place. There's not a lot of difference in the engine department. So it's got the same type of breather, same valve cover, same water pump arrangement. The cylinder blocks, cylinder heads are basically all the same. Coil attaches to the same place. Generator will mount with a very similar bracket to the same place. 445 production engine went to the stamped steel side cover, whereas the X231 has the heavy cast, but we've covered that in episodes prior. Very similar front bolster. Of course, X231 being a crawler, just had the steering gear port blocked off, as well as had a flat plate put down there where the steering pivot would have been. Otherwise, it's all the same. But looking at other side, the manifold system will be almost identical in X231 with a couple of differences, but for the most part, air cleaner mounts differently, but your governor arm throttle mechanism fairly similar on X231. Of course, it's got a much more complicated setup. The main difference is in the radiator. Now that you've seen how X231's radiator was assembled with the heavy cast top tank and the heavy steel side plates, the production 445 just attached at the bottom, very similarly with the same style straps and bolts into the bolster tank. But then it had an integral tin shroud that was soldered all around the core with a tin top tank. The overflow tube just solders on, goes down the side. Fan shroud was built into part of that whole tin top tank, and you can see they were able to nestle the fan blades much better inside that shroud than on the prototype. But that's also why we put so much work into saving X231's prototype bolster, because that also affected how all that heavy steel work attached, whereas the production tractors, a lot more tin, the radiator was less structural, and the hood and the side panels just basically surrounded it. So quite a lot of your grille structure was provided by that heavy cast iron crosspiece at the front. So, and of course your grille panels just were on these little spring-loaded catches. Everything's just kind of friction fit held in the front of that. But I do think they did a lot of good in the design department when they put the finishing touches styling-wise on the 445s. Okay, we need to work back to the operator's platform real quick because I need to perform a clutch pedal free play adjustment. I did not do this last time when we joined all these castings together, and you can see I'm pretty much right at 0. We did the brakes well over a year ago, so that's all good. But here's a bit of irony for you. So X231 used this clutch pedal that pivoted on a peg back here and then pulled on this linkage that went up to the lever that worked the fork inside the bell housing. Now, when they went to the 445 tractor, they eliminated the clutch pedal that pivots back here and all of that linkage, and instead they put this clutch pedal directly onto this shaft right here. It simplified the system, but it wasn't a very ergonomic pedal push. You had to try to kind of go straight down with it. So the 445s didn't have any kind of a free play adjustment for the pedal. They just had a slotted end down here at the shaft with a pinch bolt where you could set pedal travel in relation to your foot plates, okay, so that it didn't bottom out on the plate before you got full release on the clutch. But the ironic part is every tractor that came after the 445, we're talking Jetstar, 4-Star, and U302s, they used a clutch system almost identical to what X231 here has. And I think it's because, you know, operator comfort. It's a more forward clutch pedal push instead of that straight down. So that means we need to just use the same adjustment procedure for those later tractors on X231 here. I've had this adjustment loose the whole time because I knew I was going to need to do this after we had it put together. So we need 1.5 inch free travel here before you start encountering any clutch system pressure. So we also left the cotter pin straight so that we could pull that pin a lot easier. So if I lengthen the rod by turning this yoke, that should improve our pedal travel. Go over here and check. Let's see. A little bit more. Do one turn. I'm liking that. We can lock it down with the jam nut. All right. Yeah. Good travel. Should have us where we need to be. Just start that cotter pin temporarily here. We'll fold that later off camera and get that little chore finished. Oh, yeah, we're at that point with it. All right, everybody. So, yeah, it turns out this is, I think, 2 days after I recorded the video clip that you just finished watching. And to say that my plans for this episode really went off the rails would be an understatement. I was going to handle one more small task after adjusting that clutch, and that was finally putting the oil filter and can onto the bottom of the engine here. If you go way back in the playlist, the engine phase, you'll see why we left that off at the time. But what was supposed to be a very straightforward deal, and we did have all the stuff that we needed, turns into anything but. So I've spent the last 2 days checking filters, crossing to 445 production, running all the numbers in the interchange, trying to chase down replacements, even drawing sketches. And I've learned quite a lot. So much so, in fact, that I think I could make the entire next episode solely about oil filter issues, or the lack of oil filters in general, for the Minneapolis Moline R Series tractors, Z Series tractors, and part of the U Series tractors line. Unobtainium and extinct are two words that come to mind that describe the situation. And I've educated myself quite a lot over the last 2 days. There's a myriad of workaround options in play that people have been using lately to try to get oil filters on these tractors. I may have found a workaround to be able to still use an easily obtainable cartridge filter into the old cans. I don't want to let the cat too far out of the bag yet, but yeah, I know I told you all last time that we'd probably start into the 3-point lift disassembly in this episode. I'm going to hold off. I've got several things on order that I found on the internet that I'm waiting to be delivered here before we can really roll into this oil filter debacle. But I think it would make a very interesting episode, and I would hope that I could assist other Minneapolis Moline collectors in finding more options around extinct oil filter cartridges. So we'll just leave it at that. All right. Not the episode that I'd planned on making. We definitely stopped quite short, but I think we still have a decent one. X231 is taking shape a little bit more all the time. So, as usual, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode for what we did get accomplished, and I hope to see you back on the next one.